Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving straight into what is absolutely the most critical economic crossroads in Bangladesh's history. Looking closely at the data ahead of the FY 2026-27 budget, whether you're a government policymaker, a small business owner, or a concerned citizen, the decisions made over these next 18 months are going to shape the country's trajectory for an entire generation. So, let's unpack the structural reforms we urgently need.
To make sense of these massive macroeconomic challenges, we've broken things down into 5 key areas. First, the economic crossroads. Second, the LDC graduation timeline. Third, setting rules for external borrowing. Fourth, a clear one-year reform roadmap. And finally, choosing a better future.
Part 1. At the economic crossroads and what we might call the paradox of resilience.
Bangladesh's economic resilience is almost legendary. Yes, GDP growth has slowed down to 3.7%, and stubborn inflation is really eating into everyday purchasing power. But despite all that, look at the underlying potential. We just hit a record $30.3 billion in remittances alongside a massive 20% surge in foreign direct investment for FY25. The diaspora and global firms, they aren't backing down. They clearly still believe in the potential of this 170 million-strong market.
But here's the reality check. Resilience alone is not a strategy. You simply cannot build sustainable, long-term growth on a mountain of bad debt. We can't just keep muddling through anymore. We have to honestly confront our structural wounds, especially a banking sector that has been severely crippled by politically connected lending.
Section 2, the LDC graduation timeline. And folks, the clock is ticking. We are no longer dealing with abstract problems pushed off into the future. We are operating on a ticking clock. There is an incredibly narrow window between right now, the crucial national budget in June, and the massive least developed country graduation hitting us in November 2026. That June budget cannot be a timid, business-as-usual budget. It's our first real signal to the world.
So why is this graduation so urgent? Because it means a brutal overnight loss of trade preferences on roughly 70% of our global exports. 70%! This isn't just a minor policy tweak, it is a fundamental rewriting of the rules for how Bangladesh trades globally. Without immediate competitiveness upgrades, this transition is going to be incredibly severe.
Moving to Section 3, rules for external borrowing and how we protect our sovereign policy space. Look, before we fix the house, we need some absolutely non-negotiable guardrails for international borrowing, whether that's from the IMF or the World Bank. We have to protect our fiscal space for schools and hospitals. How? By treating loan conditions as a two-way negotiation, not a surrender of sovereignty. That means legally capping external debt at 15 to 20% of actual revenue, disclosing every single condition publicly, and tying loans to specific, auditable projects. We need the institutional backbone to just say no when a deal doesn't serve us.
Section 4, the one-year reform roadmap. Here are our 7 evidence-based recommendations.
For the FY 2026-27 budget, we've outlined 7 urgent practical recommendations. But let's be real, as policymakers, you need to hyper-focus on the structural trinity: tax, banking, and energy. Getting these 3 pillars right is essentially the master key. It unlocks the private sector's ability to drive the rest of the economy forward.
Let's start with revenue. Our chronic undertaxation is, frankly, startling. A 6.8% tax to GDP ratio starves our ability to build hospitals and roads. We need to hit that target of 10 to 12% by 2030 to fund our own future. Digitizing the National Board of Revenue and aggressively expanding the tax net to target wealthy evaders, that's not optional anymore. It's absolutely crucial.
Now, think about the banking crisis. There is a direct, undeniable line between corruption and the crushing 14 to 16% credit costs currently strangling local small businesses. Every single taka locked in a bad loan to a politically connected borrower is a taka denied to a legitimate entrepreneur. Cleaning up the banks isn't just a compliance exercise. It directly lowers credit costs, provides working capital for our garment exporters, and unlocks seed rounds for startups. It fuels private investment.
On the trade front, our reliance on garments, sitting at a dangerous 81%, is a vulnerability we can't ignore. We desperately need to establish an LDC transition fund to bolster other sectors, like pharmaceuticals and IT. With the tariff shocks coming our way, export diversification isn't just an aspiration anymore. It is a survival imperative requiring dedicated industrial parks and highly skilled trade diplomacy.
We also have 2 million brand new workers entering the market every single year. To protect them, we must aggressively guarantee baseline human capital investments. The data suggests mandating at least 15% of total expenditure on education and carving out a clear path to 5% on health. An uneducated, unhealthy workforce is a burden. Investing in our people is the bedrock of our entire economy.
Then there's the energy sector dysfunction. We really need to expose the devastating reality of capacity payments. If you aren't familiar, this is a system where public funds are literally bleeding out to pay private power plants for phantom electricity, power that was never even produced. The next budget has to transparently publish every single one of these contracts and provide a firm timeline for letting them expire.
To simplify these complex policy steps, we've built a step-by-step matrix for the next 12 months. Digitize the tax board and target evaders. Publish honest bank asset reviews, and create a provisioning fund. Stop renewing those predatory energy contracts. It is a strict one-year action plan that puts power and accountability squarely back into the hands of our domestic institutions.
Through all of this heavy restructuring, there's one final, absolutely vital recommendation. We have to actively scale our homegrown digital cash transfer platforms. With national poverty creeping up to 21.4%, we must ensure that the pain of economic reform doesn't fall on the shoulders of the most vulnerable Bangladeshis. We need to increase those inflation-adjusted allocations now.
Section 5. Choosing a better future. A demand for courage.
So what do all these numbers and policies actually mean for us? The economic reforms we need are already well understood by our local factory owners, business leaders, and economists. The people are already doing their part. The workers are showing up, the diaspora is sending funds, and investors are choosing Bangladesh. Now it requires the political will to actually execute. The moment simply does not allow for muddling through anymore.
As we stand at this crossroads, the ultimate question is this: will the next national budget actually reflect the courage of the people who keep this economy running every single day? The choices policymakers make this June will tell us everything we need to know. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Think hard about these realities, and I'll catch you in the next one.